So at the end of Season 2, Desmond turned a failsafe key that he happened to have on him, and turning that key blew up the hatch and prevented the world from exploding. There's a crater where the hatch used to be, but otherwise they don't have to screw around with the stupid button anymore. So all in all, that was pretty damn, convenient. Right, Hurley?
That seems kind of convenient.
I'm sorry?
I'm just saying, if you had this magic key the whole time, why didn't you, like, use it?
I didn't know what would happen.
Okay, but then maybe the Dharma Initiative should have told you about it? Or how about this? Maybe the Dharma Initiative should have used the magical failsafe device and then kickstarted their giant psychological experiment, instead of putting the entire world in jeopardy? Also, from the end credits of that one orientation video, we can deduce that the Dharma Initiative had people down in that hatch, pushing that button every 108 minutes for at least 24 years. And for what? How is that entire exercise not a galactic waste of time? What am I saying? I'm sure there was a brilliant purpose for it all.
Don't open that thing.
Hey, Walt! It turned out that opening the hatch wasn't that big a deal. Maybe you should have used your cognitive powers to warn people about something a little more important. Yeah, like that. Actually, let's talk about that for a second. We'll backtrack. In the middle of Season 2, something fascinating happened. Michelle Rodriguez, who played Ana Lucia, and Cynthia Watros, who played Libby, were both pulled over and charged with a DUI on the same night in Hawaii. Rodriguez, who's the bigger name, got most of the attention for this, and for good reason. After the incident, a rumor popped up that the showrunners wanted Rodriguez off the show, both for this and for allegedly being difficult on set. Damon Lindelof addressed those rumors shortly thereafter, saying,
"Not a word of it is true. Lost Story is the star, and no actor would ever be killed off for any reason other than supporting the story."
That statement, of course, looks pretty dubious in hindsight, considering that Mr. Echo was hastily killed off in Season 3 for the very simple reason that his actor no longer liked living in Hawaii, where the show was set. And what makes that statement even more dubious is that at the tail end of Season 2, both Rodriguez and Watros' characters were killed off not only in the same episode, but within a matter of seconds, in an episode called Two for the Road. Immediately, everyone assumed that Ana Lucia had been killed off because of Rodriguez's DUI, and why not? I mean, it is pretty suspicious timing, but the executive producers vehemently denied that the DUIs had any effect on what played out on the screen, which raises an interesting question. Were they lying? Sort of? Here's the thing, I'm actually willing to buy that Ana Lucia's killing was totally organic. The show had given her a full story arc, and she was even given flashbacks in the Two for the Road episode that neatly tied up her character. Plus, the producer stated that Rodriguez had only signed on to the show for a year, and Rodriguez corroborated that the death was planned from the start. She called herself a gypsy, and said that she doesn't like to be in one place for very long. And those rumors of her being difficult on set may have been overblown, since she appeared to get along with the crew pretty well.
You got him good.
Plus, her character just seemed like someone who was designed to be annexed in a dramatic way like this, since most people hated her. Even the producers described Ana Lucia as not particularly sympathetic.
You're gonna try to convince me that everyone here doesn't hate me?
However, when it comes to Libby's death, that's when my bullshit detector goes off like a fire alarm. Unlike Ana Lucia, Libby's story wasn't remotely close to being finished. Just 2 episodes before Two for the Road, it was revealed that Libby had been at the same mental hospital as Hurley, which naturally made viewers wonder how she got there. And unlike Ana Lucia, she was actually likable. Lindelof had even hyped that big things were in store for her character, saying,
"She's a little bit of a stealth surprise that we have cooking on the island. That is going to be very cool when the longer game reveals itself."
But then she suddenly steps into the line of fire, and just like that, her story is over. It's a tad too abrupt not to feel like there was an ulterior motive at work, especially since it coincided with Rodriguez's departure as well. On one of the Lost DVDs, there's a behind-the-scenes review of Two for the Road, and it goes into great detail to show how Ana Lucia was killed off.
Michelle, you're dead.
Yeah!
But Libby and Watros don't appear in the clip at all, save for a brief cameo. And considering that Libby was a more respected and significant character than Ana Lucia, her absence in the clip is a bit jarring. Even the way Libby was killed was suspicious. There was a long, tense build-up to Ana Lucia getting shot, which really makes you think that it was planned out. But Libby's death was sudden and random. It's almost as if the producers were like, "Oh, we might as well clean house since Michelle's going away. Let's just tack on Libby's death onto the script right here. Hey, Cynthia, can you kind of just step into frame? Yeah, you're dying today too, honey. Just a little more, thank you." Really though, I think the proof is in the pudding. After Libby was killed off, Lindelof promised that we'd still learn more about her character, saying,
Libby's got this mysterious backstory of which we've only given you the tip of the iceberg. We have a master plan for how we're going to tell that story, but it's all posthumous. You'll start to learn Libby's moves through flashbacks over the course of the next season. So we're not done with Cynthia, but Libby is dead.
Well, let's fact check that. Was there a master plan with Libby? Was she on screen for even 1 second in Season 3? Nope! And speaking of Season 3, let's now talk about the season that even diehard Lost fans aren't exactly fond of. Season 3 is actually light on random one-off mysteries compared to Season 2, but it's chock full of filler. You can tell the producers weren't sure which direction to take the show in at the time, because these episodes are meandering and dull, which is the one thing Lost should never be. In Season 1, there was tension in how the crash survivors functioned on a day-to-day basis. And in Season 2, the characters not only had to deal with the hatch button, which was tension in a box, but with the others, who were becoming more of a threat. But by Season 3, the hatch is gone, Dharma food drops are conveniently giving them food, and the others are just sort of doing their own thing. They keep Sawyer, Jack, and Kate locked in cages for an excessive amount of time, to the point that Jack spends like half the season with the others. But you never once get the sense that they're ever in any real danger. Even the people on the beach don't really seem to care what's going on with them.
What about Jack and Kate? They with you? They all right?
Kate's with me. But the doc, they still got her.
Okay, it's okay.
Yeah, our friend is being held captive by creepy weirdos. Yawn, whatever. The characters aren't exactly in mortal peril in the first half of Season 3. When they're not immobilized, they're drinking beers, driving a car that they found, playing ping pong, playing chess, playing more chess, camping, catching footballs, flying doves, playing the piano, playing more ping pong, watching baseball highlights.
Red Sox fans have longed to hear it.
There's even an election episode.
And politics is all about bribes.
Meanwhile, the episodic flashbacks, which until now had been pretty insightful into the characters' motivations, suddenly became tired and repetitive and really uninteresting. The most infamous of the flashbacks came in the episode Stranger in a Strange Land, where half the running time was used to show us how Jack got his tattoos, and how his tattoos meant that he's a natural leader.
This is against my people. There will be consequences, Jack.
There always are.
This episode is widely considered the worst one in the entire series, even among the executive producers, who later called it cringeworthy and desperate. The producers later acknowledged that hardcore stalling was indeed taking place in Season 3, which they pinned almost entirely on ABC for not giving the show an exact end date.
We talked a lot about the ending of the show that we wanted to do in the early years, but until the middle of the 3rd season, ABC refused to agree to end the show. They just because it was successful, they just wanted to keep going and going. So we had to switch out of the modality of thinking of working towards an end point and enter into the modality of what can we do this week? So, you know, Carlton often says, and I will now plagiarize him, in the first 6 episodes of the 3rd series, we locked our characters up in cages, because literally there was, we were locked up in cages in terms of moving the plot forwards. Once we were able to announce an end date, then we were finally able to sit down and say, remember that ending that we talked about? We can now begin marching towards it.
There's more than a bit of spin there. If the only thing wrong with Season 3 was that the writers were stalling for time, I could at least understand that. Because, let's be fair, every show, no matter how great, has at least one moment or one episode that's just awful. Ugh. But that's not what was happening with Season 3. I mean, yeah, they were very clearly buying for time. But in the midst of their stalling, the producers were putting things on the screen that were baffling. Things that they themselves claimed at the time were important, that later proved to be completely irrelevant. In a flashback, we discover that there's a volcano on the island, and in the commentary track for the episode, Lindelof says it will play a seismic role in the series, but we never see or hear of the volcano again. And don't tell me that this lavaless glowy water room from the final episode was part of a volcano, because it wasn't. In the same episode, we learned that Ben had a childhood friend named Annie, and in the same commentary track, Lindelof infers that she'll play a huge part down the line, and is even more important than the volcano. She too never appears in another episode. Season 3 is also infamous for introducing Nikki and Paulo, characters who stepped out from the background and started hanging out with the main characters. The producers claimed that they had big plans for them, but the fans fucking hated Nikki and Paulo with a passion, partly because they were suddenly hanging out with the main characters when it didn't feel like they had earned it, and partly because they were just really annoying.
Jack's gone? I don't understand. Okay, when were you planning on telling us this, Hurley?
I mean,
The backlash against Nikki and Paulo was so strong that the producers threw their plans for them out the window and had them buried alive 14 episodes into the season. But the most incomprehensible thing about Season 3 isn't some side character or some misdirected promise, it's the others. In the first 2 seasons, the others were tribal savages who wore tattered clothes, and they walked on bare feet, and they were smart, like they were hunters.
They don't leave tracks.
But in Season 3, they're suddenly like a Jonestown cult, living in Dharma barracks in the middle of the jungle, and they hold special ceremonies and funerals where they all dress in white, and they brand members if they dishonor the community. And then later on in Season 3, they go through yet another evolution, where they're suddenly like settlers, who live in tents and are always on the move. Like they just completely abandoned their gated community that they had been living at for over a decade. Very little about the others makes sense. I mean, they're not quite as mystifying as the Dharma Initiative, but they're close. So besides their occasional kidnapping of children, we find out that the others are also into running tests on people, and that they're also building an airplane runway. But their main objective, and stay with me folks, is to investigate pregnant women. It turns out that men are super fertile on the island, which makes it incredibly easy for women to get pregnant there. However, for whatever reason, women automatically die whenever they give birth on the island, and we never get a satisfying answer why. Sure, a cursory answer is thrown at us in the epilogue, but considering that 99% of you never saw the untelevised epilogue, it's not exactly a satisfying resolution, nor does it explain why the horrible thing that affects women's wombs doesn't also affect men's reproductive organs. That's how you know the island was designed by men, by the way. Honestly, you'd think this pregnancy factoid would play a bigger role than it actually does. Like, if it's that easy to get pregnant on the island, you'd think there'd be tons of accidental births occurring. And shouldn't the women be terrified to have sex, given the island's supposed 100% fatality rate to pregnancy? Unless there are Dharma brand diaphragms in those survival food drops, women should be dropping like flies every time one of them has unprotected sex. Like Kate? Kate should be dead several times over. Anyway, the others are so interested in fertility that they ventured into the outside world, sought out pregnant women, and have in the past brought them to the island to run tests on them, and have them give birth there.
It's impossible. The mothers keep dying.
Then we'll find more mothers. Who knows? Maybe there's even one on that plane.
They've even coerced medically trained people like Juliet to come to the island to help out with the births. And what's their main beef with the lost crash survivors? Well, the others want to abduct all of their women who are pregnant or who can become pregnant.
But if she hasn't had time
then
to
we'll
identify
take all their women. And we'll sort out the ones we need later.
Now, if you're asking yourself, why the fuck do they care about pregnant women? You're not alone, because it's pretty much impossible to rationalize. We learn that the whole childbirth issue is something only Ben seems to care about, although the rest of the others still have no problem carrying out his crazy wishes.
Ben has been wasting our time with novelties like fertility problems. We're looking for someone to remind us that we're here for more important reasons.
There's an episode that goes into Ben's backstory, and we find out that Ben's mother died in childbirth, which at first makes you think, oh, okay, so that's why he wants to find a cure for this. Except, it turns out he was born off the island, so none of the work he's doing would actually have been able to prevent his mom's death from happening. And over the course of the flashbacks, it's clear that if he's driven by anything, it's actually the feelings of inadequacy that his shitty dad drilled into him. Even if his mom's death had been the key to all of this, it still doesn't explain why he specifically wanted to fix this particular pregnancy issue. The island doesn't exactly have a booming population, so at the most he'd be benefiting, what, 15, 20 women? Even if he solved the great island pregnancy conundrum, what exactly was his endgame with all this? Was this really such a big deal that women and babies had to be abducted, people had to be hung up from ropes, and other people had to be murdered? And the strangest part about all of this is that Ben Linus completely stops giving a shit about pregnant women after season 3. The only way to buy his interest in fertility is to believe that he really is passionate about the issue, to the point that he's obsessed with it. But it's pretty clear that he isn't. The show comes to define Ben as someone who cares primarily about having power, to the point that he even allowed his daughter to die just so he could have some semblance of control.
I was terrified that I was about to lose the only thing that had ever mattered to me, my power. But the thing that really mattered was already gone.
And with that definition, the whole pregnancy fetish is more or less retconned out of his MO. In the seasons that come, Ben's psychopathic insistence on nabbing preggers disappears, to the point where he and the other characters never revisit the topic again. And you know those What We Know So Far About Lost TV specials that I mentioned earlier? The ones that totally skipped over Walt having powers? Well, they didn't exactly dwell on the pregnancy thing either, probably because the producers realized how goofy this all was, and were kind of hoping that we'd forget this was ever a thing.
And when Oceanic 815 crashed on the island, everything for Ben was about to change, though he did everything he could to maintain his power.
But the weirdness with the others doesn't stop there, because we learn that the others are also into lists. Jacob sends them lists of people who they then try to abduct.
Shepard wasn't even on Jacob's list.
And then the others also create their own lists. Like Ben creates a list, and random others create lists.
I want lists in 3 days.
What the hell happened? You were supposed to make the list and then bring her in. Was I unclear?
And all the lists somehow revolve around who on the island is a good person. Like if you're good, you're on the list, and if you're not, you can be killed.
Did you kill him?
Nathan was not a good person.
That's why he wasn't on the list. The man who brought me here, who brought all of my people here, he is a magnificent man. You are not on the list because you are flawed.
Also, using Dharma technology, the others somehow have access to background information on everything the crash survivors have ever done, to the point that they even know things that they did the day before they got on the plane. Things they shouldn't possibly know.
And I'm sure the first thing you did when you got here, James, was to gather everyone in a circle and tell them about the man you shot in cold blood the night before you got on the plane.
At one point in the course of their researching, they decided that John Locke was so special that they caused his abusive father to get in a car accident, so that they could then kidnap him and bring him to the island, so that they could then tell Locke that he had to kill his father so Locke could prove that he really was special. And they did all this without ever seeking Locke out. Like, if Locke hadn't decided to follow the markings that Mr. Echo left on his Jesus stick, the ones that eventually led them to the others' barracks, then what? Would the others have just, kept Locke's dad around for weeks or months on end, just waiting, in the hope that Locke would eventually stumble upon them and want to have a conversation with them? And if that's not enough mumbo-jumbo for you, the others are so protective of their inner secrets, they're so afraid of their knowledge, whatever that is, slipping into the wrong hands, that they're willing to be murdered by their own comrades, just so they never have to talk about it. Honestly, folks, it's just nonsense. In fact, the others' backstory has so little logic to it that even the creators of the show can't seem to wrap their heads around it, as you'll see in this questionnaire from 2010.
No, all right. Not. Here we go, another question. In I Do, why does Danny say about Jack he wasn't even on Jacob's list? Is he referring to a different list than the one in Jacob's cave?
Okay, now as you listen to Damon Lindelof's answer, I want you to ask yourself, Mr. and Mrs. Viewer, does this man actually know the answer to that question?
This is a fascinating question, one which we have no intention whatsoever of answering. I think that the idea that Jacob had a list that he furnished to the others and or to Ben is up for debate. Whether or not that list actually came from Jacob or was candidate related, or it came from Ben pretending that he had some relationship with Jacob that he didn't have, that's always been my interpretation. He wants Jack Shepard to perform the surgery on him, so everything that's happening in that season is sort of filtered through whether or not Ben is telling the truth or not. And I'm just going to keep on talking until...
Go ahead. Another one.
Did anybody believe that? No?
That was good.
Did you hear the awkward silence after he was done talking?
That was good.
Oh, that could have been such a great soundbite if only it had lasted a little longer.
No?
That was good.
Nothing. I've heard that before. It all sounded like Hurley-Bird.
Curse you, Terry O'Quinn, coming to your boss's rescue. That's why I love you, though. But seriously, a little clarity on this stuff would be nice. Hell, even the characters want to know the answers to this stuff.
I want to know what you people are doing on this island. Why you're terrorizing us, making lists, kidnapping children. I want to know everything.
Yes, Saeed! That is exactly what I want to know, too! Don't rest until you've heard every one of those questions answered.
But the first thing I'd like to know is, who are you?
Yeah, wait, what? No, don't ask about her! We'll find out about her in a flashback! Oh, god damn it. Yeah, that's an annoying little quirk that the show develops right around season 3. Whenever characters ask about any of the mysteries, or ask even a basic question about what's happening, whoever they're talking to will give a vague one-liner, and then the conversation instantly drops.
So you believe that this monster decided that Echo was meant to die?
I believe Echo died for a reason. I just don't know what it is yet.
Like, in the middle of Season 3, we learned that the Dharma Initiative built an electronic fence around the barracks that is able to keep the smoke monster at bay. And when Kate witnesses this murderous abomination of nature being repelled by the fence, you'd think she'd have like 100 questions about it. Like what technology was being used by the fence, how the Dharma Initiative knew to install this, how the Dharma Initiative was even able to construct this fence, considering the smoke monster should have been able to annihilate them all while they were building it. Juliet says one thing about the monster.
All right. We don't know what it is, but we know that it doesn't like our fences.
Kate doesn't remotely care about it.
You had a key.
And the subject is changed instantly. You see a lot of this with Ben Linus, who besides being a really complex character, is also a compulsive liar, and a ton of the island's mysteries are funneled directly through him, so that we never know if the mystical thing he's talking about is true, or if he's just making it up. For instance, when Ben explains how they got Locke's dad onto the island, he tells Locke that it's all because of a magic box.
What if I told you that somewhere on this island, there's a very large box, and whatever you imagined, whatever you wanted to be in it, when you opened that box, there it would be.
Now sure, 6 episodes later, Ben does tell Locke that the magic box is a metaphor, and that was later confirmed by Damon Lindelof in a TV special.
When you opened that box, there it would be.
That was a metaphor.
That?
The whole island is a magic box.
But when Ben said it's a metaphor, he was also telling Locke lie after lie after lie.
Why would Richard take you? He doesn't know where Jacob is. He doesn't talk to Jacob.
Well, who talks to him?
I do.
Well, you're the only one who talks to him.
That's right.
And no one else knows where he is?
I was born here on this island.
So how would you know that he wasn't also lying about it being a metaphor? If you just watched the show, you really would have no idea that the magic box was just a metaphor. Partly because him suddenly having Locke's dad is really, really weird, and partly because on an island filled with talking birds and ghost possession, it isn't that much of a stretch that there'd be a magical box.
Your active heart rate, however, that would be about 140, which is the point at which your pacemaker will cause your heart to explode.
Did I mention that these episodes are kind of terrible? Look, regardless of what I'm going to say about the ending, the vast majority of Lost episodes were very entertaining, but these episodes are the exception. If you look at the ratings for Season 3, you'll notice that from the Season 3 premiere to the episode where Nikki and Paulo got killed off, there's a viewership drop of more than 7 million people. In the span of barely a dozen episodes, Lost managed to shake off roughly a third of its fan base, and it's easy to see why. It isn't until a Desmond episode, 17 episodes in, that Lost mercifully starts to pick up again, and at last the show starts to resemble what it was in the first 2 seasons. Over the final 7 episodes, the crash survivors learn that there's an off-island freighter that's trying to get in contact with them, but in order to potentially get rescued, they have to shut down a transmission blocker at an underwater Dharma station and hold off an assault from the others, who are going to raid their camp in search of pregnant women. These final few episodes are pretty awesome. They're dramatic and action-packed and emotional. They're a nice reminder of how great this show was when it wasn't being bogged down by mysterious bullshit. In these episodes, we even get a very satisfying answer as to what happened to the Dharma Initiative. We learned that the native people on the island, aka the others, killed them all off in a very Jonestown-y way, and have since commandeered most of their electrical stations.
Goodbye, Dad.
I'm not kidding when I say that this might be the most satisfying reveal in the entire show, because it's definitive. There's real closure here, and best of all, it makes sense. I mean, it is a little weird that the others completely ignored the dudes in the hatch pushing the button since they all knew about them.
I watched them all die.
but it is what it is. Of course, as good as these episodes are, it wouldn't be lost if there weren't a few giant mysteries thrown in that never get a resolution, and there are 2 gigantic ones in the final couple episodes. The first comes when Ben and Locke go to meet Jacob.
We're here.
Now at this point in the show, we're not totally sure if Jacob is a real person or not, and even Ben later admits that he's never actually seen him. So Ben is pretending to have a conversation with Jacob when all of a sudden, someone actually whispers to Locke,
"Help me."
And then the room starts shaking, and something throws Ben up against the wall, and objects explode. And as the audience, we're like, what the hell was that about?
That was Jacob.
Not only is this never explained, this actually makes less sense the more we learn about Jacob. It turns out that Jacob basically has infinite powers, so turning invisible and making it so that only one person can hear him isn't out of the range of his abilities. But why was he doing this? What was the point of this? And yes, in case you're curious, it was confirmed in a DVD commentary that it actually was Jacob doing these things, although that doesn't mean the producers weren't lying when they said that, because they're not as reliable a source as you'd like them to be.
Help me.
Help you? Help you how? Can you be even a little specific?
Help me.
You could seriously communicate with him anytime you want. Why are you only saying this now?
Help me.
Why are you being so vague? And this leads into the next great mystery of Season 3, which occurs right after Ben shoots Locke and leaves him for dead. A broken and beaten Locke is about to end it all, when suddenly, making his only appearance in Season 3...
Walt. Now get up, John.
He shot me and I can't move my legs.
You can move your legs. Now get out of the ditch, John.
Why?
Because you have work to do.
Huh? Again, I've already showed you every line of dialogue Walt gets after Season 3, and thus, we know that this never gets answered, and we know that getting Walt off the island was just camouflaged by the producers to avoid having a deep-voiced teen play an 8-year-old. So, at the risk of being repetitive, why, what, and how is this scene possible if he's off the island? Were the writers incapable of dangling a meaningless Walt mystery over the audience for even one season? The funniest part about all this is that there are quite a few Lost fans who refuse to accept that some of this stuff is bullshit. They have to believe that everything in the show meant something, because, you know. And so there's a prevalent theory among diehard Lost fans that Walt has the ability to teleport, or can astral project himself through time. One theory on Lostpedia reads, Walt can project himself through time and space because electromagnetism, as seen in The Swan and Orchid, manipulates space and time. The reason this is hilarious is that when a rejuvenated Locke gets out of that hole, the first thing he does is throw a knife into this woman's back and kill her. So if Walt really can travel through time, then he's the most fucking inept empath ever, since innocent women die whenever he transports himself through time. Plus he has visions that don't mean anything. He materializes deadly polar bears, he kills innocent birds, and he never uses his powers in a productive way.
Polar.
Maybe after Locke threw that knife into Naomi's back, Walt had an epiphany where he was like, man, I need to stop trying to help, I am bad at this. And that's why you never see him on the island again. But you know what? All that goes away the moment Jack picks up this phone in the season finale and, at long last, gets in contact with someone from the outside world. And you see the joy on everyone's faces at the thought that they're gonna get rescued. This heartfelt moment should have marked the coming conclusion of the show. It should have signaled that the end was near, that their struggles were nearly over. Alas, the episode didn't end there, because the next thing you know, we're getting a future shot of a bearded, off-island Jack Shepherd who yells to Kate the most notorious, awful line in the entire history of the show.
We have to go back!
Yep, they had to go back. The same way you have to come back for part 4 of this review. See what I did there? It's a transition. Okay, whatever.